Hey everybody, Case and I've got a great video for you today because Case, it's another year and another dozen or so off-roaders we've owned.
We've had several new off-roaders, some older off-roaders as well, and in this video we're going to talk about all the ones that we've had and all the ones that we've sold.
So this is our honest opinion of the various cars and trucks in the four-wheel drive world that have come through the TFL headquarters over the past year. And we're going to start with this. Now this is one of our latest long-term trucks, the Ford Ranger Raptor. And Case, initial impressions on the truck?
Well, we're starting off strong, Tommy, because I'm just going to come out and say it. This is my favorite truck of the whole year.
Wow.
It is super fun to drive. It's very quick. We did a Ford performance tune on this to bump it from 405 horsepower to 455 horsepower and 536 pound-feet of torque for less than $1,000 with a warranty and everything. So this truck, super fast, Fox live valve suspension, selectable front and rear lockers. So it's not only good at speed, but you and I took it rock crawling against the Tacoma Trail Hunter. And let's be honest, this kind of ran circles around it.
Dude, it just dominated. I mean, compared to the top dog Toyota, you get 2 more cylinders, you get way more power, you get a front locking diff, you get a better tire. I mean, this is the no-brainer of the year. I know that the ZR2 is a very impressive unit as well, but what sells the Ranger for me is that twin turbo V6 versus its competition, which are all 4 cylinders except for the Gladiator, which is kind of a dog. So this is easily the most impressive off-road truck of the year, for sure.
Absolutely. It is really very capable. It's a lot of fun to drive. Interior is pretty decent too. You know, it's not the truckiest of trucks, I guess. It's got kind of a small bed.
We did have a camper in this truck for a while, which was a pretty cool look, and we actually ended up selling that to a woman that had another Ranger Raptor, which was very cool. That was a nice way to add some usability and some campability to the truck. But overall, this has been the highlight of the year for, I think, Case and I. It's been really, really good. So moving on to this little blue guy behind us. Now this is our cheap Jeep. This is Bill. The idea of this series is we bought a base model Wrangler, and with very, very minimal used upgrades, we're seeing how capable this Jeep can be.
This is a very basic vehicle.
Yes.
But what's funny is that even on this very base Jeep with manual mirrors that you have to move by hand, it's got hand crank windows, doesn't have power locks even, you still have a massive screen in the center of the dash. You've got some pretty nice tech overall, even the instrument cluster, all that. So it's kind of a weird mix of being very basic in some fundamental ways that impact your daily usability, but also very high tech in some ways, especially with the screens.
What I really appreciate about Bill here is the off-road ability. I mean, it is such a beast. This is proof that you really don't need a Rubicon. Case and I have taken this little Jeep up some very impressive things. We did the whole loop of the Ironclads Trail, do you remember? And little Bill absolutely rocked it, good clearance. Throw in a set of takeoff wheels and tires from a Rubicon, and that's really all you need. Maybe a set of rock sliders, maybe a set of sway bar disconnects, and this thing is a beast. My only problem with Bill here is this is still a $37,000 Jeep with manual everything, no automatic headlights, no heated seats, nothing like that. We got it for $32,000, which is a little better, but these are expensive vehicles.
For being a cheap Jeep, it's not that cheap. They really don't make them cheap anymore. This, as far as options go, it's got the hardtop, it's got a window tint, it's got automatic transmission, which automatic transmission, that was kind of a big upgrade as far as cost is concerned. But beyond that, really not much at all. And still, that MSRP jacks up pretty quickly. So it's kind of hard to get a cheap Jeep at all, but this is about as cheap as they get. And as far as capability, yeah, it is super capable. Maybe the biggest limiting factor on some obstacles is the short wheelbase. It can tip backward a little bit more than a longer wheelbase vehicle would, but short of that, this is really good.
The only thing that I would say about this Jeep from a value standpoint is with the Colorado incentives and the federal incentives and some crazy money on the hood, some of our local dealers have Willys 4xEs which is a plug-in hybrid, which is more power, plus 20 miles of EV range, plus heated seats, plus the rear locking diff, plus standard off-road tires, and they're like 38 grand out the door. They're $20,000 off sticker. So I would be tempted to go for one of those over just a basic two-door. I hate to say it, for just a couple $1,000s more, you just get a lot more vehicle, and obviously that's a $50-some-thousand vehicle, but with discounts, it's not that much more than Bill here. So I'd look into those. And by the way, exciting news about this Jeep. Stellantis announced that the next year of the Wrangler, you couldn't get the automatic with the V6.
Yeah.
And they reversed that.
Yeah.
Did you see that? Because everybody wanted them, yeah.
Yeah.
So next up, we've got another vehicle in the off-road fleet. This is a 2023. We bought this used for $10,000 off sticker, essentially. This is a Land Rover Defender 9D base model, 4-cylinder steel wheels, two-door. Case, what do you think?
Pangea green, white top, white wheels. It definitely has the look. What's funny is that for a two-door, it's actually not that small. You look at it, especially relative to the Jeep, it's quite a bit taller, it's quite a bit wider, and it's not a very long vehicle, but the size is a little deceptive.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, it kind of in pictures looks teeny tiny and stubby, but it's basically the width of like a full-size truck. And the other thing you might notice is the height is nuts. I mean, I'm a solid 6 foot here. I'm right about the same height as this Jeep, and this Land Rover sticks a good 4 or 5 inches above me. This has been an awesome vehicle, no reliability issues. We did just bring it to Land Rover for its first oil change because they were fixing some A-pillar trim here. That was the biggest mistake we've made because they charged us $400 for an oil change on a 4-cylinder turbo 2-liter engine. That is insane.
That is a little obnoxious. But other than that, this has so far been pretty good to us. This is a relatively base Defender, which still gets you a lot of comfort, a lot of nice features and nice tech. It's very comfortable inside. This one is basic enough that it's on coil springs. And I think both you and I feel like a lot of the modern Land Rover experience, air suspension is part of that.
Yep.
So if I were speccing one of these for myself, I would want that air suspension, not only for the variation in ride height, but also just for the comfort, because these coils are good on the road, but sometimes off-road they feel just a little bit too stiff. And I don't think actually that this setup articulates as well as Land Rover's air suspension.
I would agree with that. But as a whole, very cool vehicle, very excited about it. It's been really good to us. And yeah, no reliability updates in the, 5,000 miles we put on it. It's been perfect. All right, we're gonna cut now, go to the ranch, and talk about some vehicles we own up there. So we're here at the ranch and we're checking out some of the off-roaders currently in the fleet, starting with Trailhound Case.
This is a truck that we have held on to, at least as far as I've been here, maybe longer than anything. It's up there with the most of them because it's so useful. It's a good looking truck. It's nice to drive. It's got a decent bit of off-road capability. We can tow any of our car hauler trailers with a car on it. This has just been a great piece of machinery.
And this truck has done a lot for us. It's towed all across the country. It's been in California towing like 4 or 5 times in the last year and a half. It's been to Moab, it's been on some longer overland adventures, and it has been the workhorse of TFL, which is of course why we're selling it. And we'll talk about that in a sec. But let's talk about some of the things that we've done with it in our impressions case of like the bumpers and the winch and the lights.
Yeah, when we bought it, obviously it was a completely factory truck, and we towed with it and tested it as it was in factory condition. But then we started working with some cool companies, putting on some of these AEV components, like this impressive steel front bumper, also the matching steel bumper on the rear. We've got a 16,000-pound rated Warn winch up front. We have 37-inch BFG tires. We've got some really nice components on this, a BDS suspension lift.
Yeah, and what I have to say about a lot of the stuff is this truck has lived through some pretty rough Colorado winters, and this is one of the reasons you buy AEV gear, is it's expensive, but it does not rust or corrode.
Look, we've tried out a lot of different skid plates, rock sliders, steel bumpers from a lot of different brands, and AEV is not paying me to say this, but my genuine feeling is that these are expensive, so no doubt about that. If you're buying these pieces are going to cost you quite a bit, but you get what you pay for. They really put a lot of effort into designing these. You can see we've still even got our proximity sensors built into the bumper here. It's a really nice component, like you said, durable as well. And I like the way that it's shaped. It doesn't look like it was put together in somebody's backyard. These are very professionally put together. Yeah, we've got some cool amber fog lights.
Oh yeah, they're just awesome. And let's talk about this winch too. So Warren 16.5. This is the biggest winch we've ever put on a vehicle. Yeah. I've actually used this winch on several occasions. My most notable was when our friend James got his 4Runner so stuck in the mud in the back course.
Yeah.
I mean, we tried several winches and we could not get him out. And then I drove this truck at the top of the hill, stuck the parking brake on, pulled cable, and it just like got it out like it was nothing. That was really cool.
And that's why it's been so hard for us to get rid of this truck. Look, at a certain point, as much as we love some of the vehicles that we have here, there's only so many videos you can film with something before it starts to lose interest with our audience. So that's usually when we move a vehicle on. But this one has been so useful, we've continued to hang on to it because a tool like this is hard to replace. And just recently, we have moved to replace it.
Yeah, so this truck is going away starting January. It's no longer going to be with us. I think a TFL viewer has purchased it and is driving it back. I think he's out of Washington, and he's going to end up with a great truck with professionally tuned remote resi Fox shocks and all the rest. But it's been awesome. There's almost no complaints I have with it. We've had very few reliability problems. It's been really good. And to replace it, Case, we have brought along our newest addition to the TFL off-road fleet here.
Yeah, and we picked this truck because this is specifically one of the newer HD trucks that are out there that we haven't tested. So this is specifically the Trail Boss version of a Silverado 2500 6.6 Duramax. So we still have our diesel towing capability and ease because we live here in the mountains. The extra torque and the fuel economy when we go cross country is all really nice stuff to have. So we've got similar capability there as the Ram, but in a slightly newer truck because that Cummins has been great, but at least for us from a news perspective and from a video perspective, it is getting a little old.
There's a new one coming, right? So it doesn't make sense to hold on to the new generation from a testing standpoint. This Trail Boss is a brand new trim, as Case mentioned. It's got some cool stuff right off the bat, like it's got recovery points. It's got KO3 tires on it, the new BF Goodrich All-Terrain. It's got the G80 auto-locking rear locker. So not, you know, like an AT4X maybe.
Yeah.
Certainly not a power wagon in terms of capability, but looking like it's going to be pretty decent. And I'm not really sure what the plan is. I'm hoping we can convince Andre to do the same kind of thing that we did with this Ram. Nice bit of lift on here, new bumper, maybe some side treatments to get some rocker protection. This truck, though, is pretty exciting to me.
I do have one comment.
What you got?
Maybe even a complaint. We haven't taken it off-road yet, but I fear that this wheel design here on the Trail Boss looks great, but do you see a problem with that for off-roading?
The black painted wheel that sticks out beyond the sidewall?
It sticks out about 4 inches further than the tire.
Yeah.
Maybe not that much, but it sticks out quite a bit. This is a very wide truck. I think we're going to have a hard time not obliterating the painted surfaces of these wheels.
It's brutal. And you'll notice, like, Jen, if you want to take a look at, this is what you want for off-road, right? This KMC, it's a 17-inch wheel that's tucked up nice and out of the way with this beadlock capable rim versus the stupid 20-inch wheel that cuts away at sidewall and is black painted that sticks out. This is not a good choice for an off-road truck. There's also some kind of hokey stuff I don't love, like they like to tout a premium shock package, the Ranchos. You know, it's nothing fancy.
No, it's not something that we've never seen in any shock ever.
The only thing I think we messed up with this truck, the Ram, from a capability standpoint, is
nothing.
It doesn't have a rear locker.
Well, yeah, rear locker would be nice. It's just a limited slip,
yeah,
which works in most situations. We've gotten that truck through some pretty gnarly stuff. I will say about that truck in particular, in low range, it's very jerky. So any throttle input you give that truck in low range is pretty aggressive. It's hard to be very smooth with the throttle. I don't think that they programmed the throttle pedal very well for low range. It's like they didn't even test it at all. And that truck doesn't have a camera system. Look, we're old school, as we'll see in a second. So Tommy and I like using our eyes when we're off-roading, but when you have a hood that is that big, you, from the cockpit, if you don't have cameras, you cannot see anything that is less than 20, 25 feet ahead of you on the trail.
Yeah.
So by the time you're driving over something, you've completely forgotten, at least with my level of intelligence, what it was that was in front of you. So it's a little difficult.
100%, yeah.
Off-road it.
So having those cameras is a great thing. All right, let's talk about one of the latest additions to the off-road fleet. So this is a 2016 Mercedes-Benz G63. This is one of my dad's dream cars. Knew these were like 150, 160 grand in this spec. This one we bought for 58,000 miles. I'm sorry.
$58,000.
$58,000 with 89,000 miles. And then we actually went ahead and did something pretty cool. So my dad wanted kind of a cool red and black motive. So naturally, me having no style said, let's do bright red and keep a lot of bits black. And then Case, who does have style, said, no, that's a bad idea. So talk us through what Shane did in terms of color on this thing.
Yeah, so our buddy Shane, he has a company out here called Innovation Installations. He's done a lot of work for us. He wrapped my Land Rover. He wrapped a Tacoma that we had in the past. He wrapped the Cybertruck. He's wrapped a lot of vehicles for us. He's our go-to guy. He does a really good job. And he did this for us. What I wanted to do was to kind of mimic some of the two-tones that you can get from the factory on G-Wagons. Now, I'm gonna be honest, I personally probably would have done the hood in red.
Okay.
But I do like the fact that the body is red, the roof is black, the fender flares are black. That's kind of what Mercedes does from the factory on theirs. The hood being black still does make it look, I guess, a little bit more custom versus a more kind of OEM look. But this will be nice because it'll at least protect some of our paint. That being said, the fender flares are the part of this that are sticking out the furthest.
Sure. I think it looks great though. I mean,
even so, yeah, it does make it look good on camera. Because here's one thing for us. There's a lot of vehicles that we love the look of in black, but if you're shooting a thumbnail or something for a video, which is what we do, it's our whole company, right? Then it doesn't really pop as much. So getting some color on this helps us from a video perspective.
Totally. No, I think you're absolutely right. And actually, even my wife, who was super on the fence when I told her this, thinks that this looks really good. She really likes the matte red. I think it came out really cool. Now, this vehicle is a very impressive machine. We went ahead and actually spaced it out a little bit. So it's got like a 1/2-inch spacer on the wheels.
Yeah,
and then we're running these Falcon tires, right, Case?
Yeah, so we've got some more tire on it, which is nice. More aggressive tread, which I think is probably the most substantial difference as far as it goes functionally off-road. Is the key in it? Should be. But by far the best thing about this G-Wagon is not something that we did, unsurprisingly. How about this, Tommy? Side pipes.
Dude, this thing has probably the best sound of any SUV. So G63 has the 563 horsepower V8, the 5.5 liter. Absolute rocket for what it is. You know, I thought 8-year-old SUV, it's not gonna be that quick. It's actually pretty good.
Yeah.
It really boogies. Now the problem with the side pipes, as we found out in a video recently, is they hang pretty low in a place you don't really want them.
Yeah, they're kind of in the worst possible spot because that is one of our really one of our low points when we're driving over an obstacle as far as breakover angle. That's just a pretty bad position. So our limiting factor is that because, you know, as G-Wagons do, we've got front, rear, and center lockers.
Yep.
So we can fully lock this up. We've got a lot of traction. We're really mostly limited on clearance and mostly from the middle. I was a little worried about the big bumper where all these big radiators for that AMG V8 are.
Yeah.
But that actually didn't end up being a problem for us. The pipes
side clearance. So, Case, let me ask you a question. $58,000, right? Do you buy a 8-year-old used G-Wagon, or do you buy a Toyota 4Runner, right? Do you buy a midline Ford Bronco? I mean, if I give you 58 grand and said you need to go buy an off-roader and you have to spend every penny of this, what do you end up going for?
Well, any of those other options would be the smart option to get better on a trail, realistically. You know, Sasquatch package Bronco or kitted out 4Runner. But that all assumes that I am smart. And that
bad assumption.
It is a bad assumption because that I am not. I'm very impractical. I love G-Wagons. I would probably personally, the AMG is fun, it sounds really good, and it is quick. If I were buying myself a G-Wagon, I wouldn't care so much about it being quick. I like the non-AMG bumpers, so I would probably kit out with a suspension lift and a winch and some other things, just like a G550 or a G500, maybe G500.
Yeah.
And that would be my route.
Fair
But
enough.
yeah, I love G-Wagons. And, you know, imagine hitting a trail in a G-Wagon. Everybody else out there is in Wranglers and Broncos and Toyotas. You pull up in this, pretty cool.
Pretty cool. And that, by the way, is pretty cool story. My dad's dream car. And then, of course, one of our good friends of the channel, I think, really wants it and is going to buy it. So Scott O'Sullivan, who's sponsoring our G-Wagon series at O'Sullivan Law, is going to buy the G-Wagon from us, which I think makes my dad a little sad, but very excited that it's going to a cool home.
Yeah.
And I can guarantee that won't be his last one. But we still got a lot of adventures to go with that G-Wagon, so it's sticking around. All right, so this is our most eclectic vehicle in the TFL off-road fleet.
Which, in my mind, is another way of saying maybe our best. I absolutely love these old Jeeps. These old flat fender Jeeps mean a lot to me. So anybody who's watched any video that we've done with this Jeep will know, because I say it every time. When I was 9 years old, I learned how to drive on a CJ2, which does have some differences even mechanically from this, but it is 90%, let's call it, the same vehicle. Feels very similar. Transmission on this is not quite as good as the CJ2, but I have such a huge soft spot for these old Jeeps. When we showed up and saw this for the first time, we were in California, I melted, man. I love these.
These are super cool. And this is a really special Jeep for me because I'm a big history buff, and this is a genuine World War II Jeep. So
yeah,
a lot of people will take Case's Jeep, which is very cool in its own right, but then kind of fake a World War II Jeep. This is an actual Willys or Willis, depending on how you say it, MB, which is the military version B. So this is what they sent overseas to Japan, or not to Japan, to the islands outside of Japan, and to, of course, the European theater. So really a fantastic piece of history. They're a little bit expensive for what they are because they're kind of getting rare. It's almost, 80 years old. So we paid like $21,000 for this, but these are fantastic off-roaders. I mean, Case was telling me for years how good that little CJ2A is on a trail, and when we finally got this out on one, it's amazing what they will do. It's just incredible.
It's a little mountain goat. It doesn't weigh anything. It's got, well, let's be honest, it doesn't have a ton of articulation, but it is on solid axles. It is body on frame. It's all kind of the fundamentals you would want from a 4x4.
Yeah.
It's obviously got low range. So they just kind of scamper up hills, and they are a ton of fun to drive. It's open diffs. It doesn't articulate the most of anything. And these tires, really cool. Not the most traction compared to KO3s and newer stuff. But if nothing else, this is an experience. It's a lot of fun to drive on a trail.
No, I think that this is the coolest car we own, period. It's just so unique and so different and so capable, and it's just an amazing piece of American engineering that started it all. So this isn't going anywhere in the fleet. My dad loves it, even though he doesn't drive it ever. I think it's cool bringing it to the store every now and then and putting around at the ranch. So this is sticking around with us. It's got a rebuilt engine in it. It's a really nice little driver.
It's about as nice as they get.
Yeah, realistically, you're not going to find one that's much nicer. So this guy's sticking around. We got some more stuff to show you, and we'll cut to that now. So, Case, this is our latest long-term Tesla. What are we looking at here?
Well, Honda's been really cool about letting us hold on to side-by-sides for quite a while, because they usually give them to press folks like us out in California. And we're not based in California, but we're out there every now and then, and they let us grab, most recently, this two-seater Honda Talon. This is super fun because it's got short suspension, good bit of suspension travel. It's actually got a dual clutch transmission, which is cool versus like a CVT. It's pretty fast, pretty fun.
Yeah, Case, and this comes off the heels of something really cool. So we actually had a Honda Talon. We had a Honda Pioneer for a bunch of months, probably over a year, wouldn't you say?
Oh, yeah.
And that was the most useful little machine around the ranch. It did amazing work out in the back course, tugging people out of bad situations. It did amazing work moving things around the ranch, old burn piles. Morgan used it to actually do some gardening. So it was really a useful little machine that was just a do anything, go anywhere unit. But of course it was, going on over a year old. So we wanted to test something new, try something different. So that's why they sent us this Talon.
Exactly, and this one is more set up for fun. You've got big paddle shifters here by the steering wheel. We do have a bit of a bed around the back. It's not a dump bed or anything, and it's not a huge space back here, but it is enough to carry some things around the ranch if you need to.
For the limited driving I've done in this thing, it's an absolute ripper. I love the dual clutch. Gives you a really positive engagement versus a CVT and some of its competitors.
Yeah, and it makes it a little bit more fun to drive.
Yeah. Now, lastly, the last thing I want to talk about at the ranch is my personal vehicle, because I get a lot of questions. Is it still running? And the Toyota people will probably say, it ain't so, but 15 months later and 15,000 miles later, my LR3 still trucking along.
Is that because it has a Ford motor?
Yeah, that's some fighting words here, Case. But this is now an 83,000 mile Land Rover LR3, and guess what's broken on it? Nothing.
That's hard to believe. Is that maybe because this one has no options, so there's very few things to break?
Case does like to point out that my Land Rover doesn't even have automatic headlights, but it has been genuinely the best SUV I've ever owned. And speaking of which, Case has one too, which is middle LS swap time.
Yeah, it has an LS in it. It has a transmission in it. It has a transfer case in it. Finishing up the wiring right now. Got to set up the cooling system, button up a few things, but hopefully in the next couple weeks it'll be on the road. This one, however, all jokes aside, these LR3s are so good off-road. And this one has actually been really good to you. In fact, you've even taken this cross-country multiple times. You trusted it, not only with yourself, but you and your wife.
And her whole family. This thing has been the absolute workhorse of the Micah household. She's been daily driving it, and it has been amazing. Just keep going everywhere I point it. So those are the vehicles the off-road vehicles, I should clarify, we currently own in the TFL fleet.
Yeah.
But there's been a bunch more that we've owned in 2024. I'm going to talk about some final thoughts about them, starting with the Ineos Grenadier.
Man, I miss that rig. It was really good off-road once you got the lockers kicked on. Getting those lockers kicked on sometimes could be a little bit of a process, but once you did, it was nice.
That vehicle was more of an experience to drive than any other new car. I mean, it really was like driving a factory resto mod. I know I keep saying that, but it's true. It's such a vintage feeling experience with the thin A-pillars and the perfectly upright windshield and side windows and these huge fishbowl-like effect and this old school steering and suspension, but it had like, you know, airbags and air conditioning that worked and some stuff. Yeah. The value is not really there. Ours was like 84 grand, no heated seats, right? No automatic lane centering or adaptive cruise control. So if you're looking for like features, it's not the vehicle for you, which is what they would say is the purpose of the vehicle, right? It's supposed to be old school and basic. And then some of the tech was very bad.
Yeah.
It was just the screen needs to be better. I wish it had an instrument cluster instead of just a center screen.
Yeah.
But as a whole, I think Case and I both love that thing.
Yeah, it was compromised almost in some of the right ways. Compromised in ways that made it feel like a unique vehicle, not like a lot of the cookie cutter stuff that was out there. I think if you wanted to make the perfect 4x4 or a perfect 4x4, you would take that Ineos Grenadier and put our Defender's interior in it, and then you would have the perfect rig.
Yeah, that's true. Because
that would be even more expensive.
The interior felt pretty cheap.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I know there's a difference between being utilitarian and being cheap, right? Yeah. And I like utilitarian. I think the Defender actually has a good balance of it, like you said, without feeling like a tin can.
If you could combine those two things, you would have a hell of a rig.
So next vehicle that we did sell in 2024 was our Toyota Tacoma TRD Off-Road. This is a vehicle that I'm a little lukewarm on. I think that it had a lot of great features. I think it had some pretty good capability, but it didn't do a lot for me in terms of an all-around package.
No, and you know, obviously we had one pretty high-profile issue with the front diff and the early programming for the traction control system on that they afterwards changed. So that's not an issue anymore. But you know, I mean, it was a good all-around truck. But we're a little spoiled in that following it up then with the Ranger Raptor. It's kind of hard to be really excited about the Tacoma when something like that Ranger Raptor, admittedly more expensive, but such a good off-road truck, and even compared to the higher end Tacoma off-road trims, that Ranger Raptor is such a good option. So. Yeah.
It was pretty special. Now, the next vehicle that we own this year that Kate and I are totally going to disagree about was the Jeep Renegade.
Yeah, which was so good off-road that we ruined it with a hitch that got rid of all of its clearance. Tommy, that was never a good vehicle. What was insane, so this is a vehicle that we bought used, pretty heavily used. How many miles? Almost 100,000
yeah, like
miles?
95,000 miles.
So somebody drove this Renegade 100,000 miles, and I feel horrible because that person, after driving that Renegade almost 100,000 miles, must hate cars. Because you would get into that Renegade, you would start it up, and the whole thing would shake like an old school motel bed with a massage function. Not in a good way. Maybe one of the engine mounts was going bad on it. Certainly felt like it. But that was such a, the British would call it dreary car to be in. It was cheap. It was so bad, Tommy. That car genuinely must have ruined vehicles for whoever had it before us.
Now, pretty much everybody at the office agrees with Case's take on this.
Except for you.
Liked the Renegade because I thought it was a really good piece of packaging. It had a really small exterior footprint and a ton of space on the inside. It fit so much stuff. You had great visibility out of it.
It was square,
with these
so
huge,
you could put things in it.
Huge windows was really good. And actually for that subcompact class, it had more capability than anything on the market. It had recovery points, it had skid plates, you could put off-road tires on it pretty easily.
It's just a worse Bronco Sport.
Yes, but it was also a 2015 and the Bronco Sport didn't exist. And I think actually it's smaller than the Bronco Sport and makes better use of its interior space. And it did have a ton of space in there.
That's almost like advocating for a life lived with smallpox because there was a time before the vaccine for smallpox existed. Like, the Renegade is so bad. Thank God we live in an era where there's the Bronco Sport.
Would you have liked that Renegade if it had a better engine? Because I think if that thing had a better powertrain, it actually would have been pretty good.
If the whole car didn't shake immediately on startup, and look, I'm not that sensitive. I drive a second-gen Cummins. I don't need every vehicle to be as refined as a Mercedes-Benz and a Porsche 911. But that Renegade, especially for a 2015, when you get in it and your vision is blurry because the whole car is shaking, it's so bad. Thank God we live in an age where you don't have to subject yourself to that torture.
The funny thing is I drove those cars when they were new and they didn't shake a lot less than ours did. They still shook pretty bad.
You're really selling me on it.
Ours definitely was a little tired, but I like the Renegade. Case hated it. We also owed this year an 80 series Land Cruiser, which is another vehicle. This is going to give me so much hate. I had always dreamed about owning an 80 series, solid axle, inline six, old school ruggedness. It was a little bit of a letdown, actually. It didn't feel that special compared to a lot of other four-wheel drives I've driven. And I know it'll last a million years, but I feel like there's a lot more experience you can get for the money because they're worth like 18, 20, 25, and 30 grand now. And I mean, it was pretty slow. The interior was really boring. The handling was fine. The effort capability was all right. But I just feel like unless all you care about is making it through the deserts of Morocco with zero problems, there are just better options out there for the price.
Yeah, and I can understand that perspective. I think that the 80 series is cool, especially as a platform to build something out of. In stock form, ours was not strictly stocked at bigger tires. But if ours had lockers, it would have been much more capable. Our 80 series being fully open diffs meant that, you know, pretty quickly, if you got articulated on both axles, then that was kind of your limiting factor. It didn't have any advanced kind of traction control system to make up for that. So it would have been a lot more capable if it had lockers. And there are some 80 series that came from the factory with lockers. But if I remember right, factory locker 80 series are expensive, but isn't that also the older motor?
No, I think you can get them on the FZJ82,
Yeah. Either way, it's never going to be fast.
No.
And we live at a mile above sea level where everything is already slower.
Yeah.
So getting up to highway speed, going uphill in an 80 series on bigger tires, Yeah, it's a
struggle.
It's a process.
It's a process. And then lastly, the last truck I want to finish on that we own, the most controversial truck of the year is, of course, the Tesla Cybertruck. And I'm bringing this into the off-road video because I did have a chance to bring it to Moab, take it off-road. Really sucked the first time I took it. Then
Yeah.
Tesla updated it and gave us locking diffs, and it was actually really good. And then we also had some chances to take it off-road in Colorado. But Cybertruck, specifically as an off-road choice case, better or worse than you expected?
Better than I expected. It's, the funny thing about the Cybertruck that we've talked about in many videos is that people either love it or absolutely think it's the worst thing that's happened to humanity since smallpox, maybe. It's neither, right? It's neither the best truck ever nor the worst thing since smallpox.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I will say it actually does reasonably well is off-roading. You can get quite a bit of height from the suspension, like 16 inches of ground
Some crazy
clearance.
number, yeah.
And the locker function on it actually works reasonably well.
Yeah.
There's a lot of other EV pickups where those e-lockers or whatever some of the other trucks offer, depending on the truck, don't work that well. Does work really well on the Cybertruck.
Yeah, I actually was very impressed. I mean, it's long, which doesn't help it.
And it's heavy.
It's very heavy. That's a great point. And then when you get in the off-road heights, there's not enough down travel on the suspension, so it gets pretty stiff.
And there's little bits of trim.
Yes, the little triangles that kind of deflect air around the wheels. Those
triangles.
They get torn off immediately. But I will say, in the off-road modes, with four-wheel steering engaged, with the mechanical lockers going, it's very good. The throttle programming is really good, especially like if you want some high-performance sand driving experience. It's very good at that too.
Yeah.
So I think as a whole, it's a really kind of impressive thing off-road.
Would you say it's the best electric truck off-road?
So I probably would, and that's because I have not driven. I think actually some of the clearance and programming of the Hummer EV is better, but I've never driven the 2X that has the mechanical lockers.
Right.
And the 3X that has that virtual rear locker just doesn't work very well.
Virtual rear locker does almost nothing.
No. And I actually think that it's better than the Rivians for the same reason, with the mechanical locking diffs.
Even the Gen 2?
I haven't driven the Gen 2 off-road. We're getting one next week, so we'll let you know about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the range is okay, right? You're not going to go overlanding in it, but for a day out on the trail, it's pretty decent.
Yeah.
I think it looks hideous, but it's also pretty durable in some instances. So, yeah, I was actually pretty impressed with that truck off-road, and everyone's going to be mad now.
Yeah.
So, folks, let us know what you think in the comment section below. What off-roaders do you want to see us purchase in 2025?
Probably not another Renegade.
Probably not, but maybe a Compass. And this has been Tommy.
Okay.
We'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.